I'm the co-chair of the membership team for the Foundation for Climate Restoration. And I'm hosting this webinar with Joan Bordeaux, who's also on the membership team with me, and with Julia Dederer, who's kind of leading our executive branch of the vast Foundation for Climate Restoration. So they are my co-hosts on this call. And this is a very special monthly gathering for the Foundation for Climate Restoration. Our nickname for ourselves, just in case you didn't know it, is F4CR. We meet every Wednesday at this time. Everybody's invited, and the people that meet every Wednesday, we're the people who are in the forefront and the wheels and the gears that are creating and generating this movement and keeping it alive and moving it forward and on and on. Great to see Tom and Carol Rayford, and we see your faces live here. So we are thrilled to have all of you here. I'm especially thrilled all the people that I don't know yet. Some of you may know some of our other hosts and co-hosts, but it's just great, really, really terrific to have all of you here. Now, just raise your hand. Like, how many people are brand new to these calls? Who's this like your first time? Brandy, Stanislow, Dar, Ted Schachter. God, that's great to have you. And then, how did you happen to find out about this?
I'm a friend of David's.
Oh, terrific, Dave. Ted, great.
I don't remember.
Okay. We are very, very fortunate to have you all here. So we have a special guest tonight, and I think you all know that, which is David Snyder. But before we introduce him, and let's see, I just want to review for you quickly that our intention for each of these calls is that each and every call sparks for each and every one of us new enthusiasm and new openings for action. Now, and thank you for putting that slide up, Bob. And we're going to jump right now to our vision and mission slide. And our vision and mission for the Foundation for Climate Restoration is the climate restored by 2050. Our mission is to generate the global alignment for climate restoration by 2030, such that climate restoration becomes the overarching goal of all climate action. And by climate restoration, we mean restoring the climate to one that humans have evolved and thrived in, with CO2 levels below 300 parts per million. We can take that slide down. Julia Dederer is going to introduce our guest, and our guest is going to be able to tell you a lot more about how we reach 300 parts per million, and probably many more things besides that. Julia?
Yeah, thank you. I'm thrilled to introduce David Snyder. I got to know him some months ago. I don't know how many months ago it is. And we had coffee several times at the local coffee roastery and got to know him. He's an environmental and civil engineer with 40 years in the field. I also got to see him after seeing him do a live presentation in Milpitas a few months ago at the IEEE local chapter. I definitely wanted him to come and speak with us, although he may not, it may be a bit of a shorter presentation, but I was just captivated by what he talked about in terms of his own seeing climate restoration as a real possibility and stepping in with his expertise to contribute. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you, David, and you'll speak for however long you do, 20-ish minutes, and then we'll have time for Q&A. So over to you.
All right, I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Perfect.
See if I can get this to go the way I want it to. And how's that looking?
Click to add title, it says.
You're
That's the
kidding.
page we're seeing. Yes, that's the page we're seeing.
Okay, I had something going here that I thought was going to help, but I'm going to change
Yes,
that.
good. One more time with feeling. Ah,
Nice. Nice.
And I'm going to try and move this. See,
we're good. This looks beautiful. Climate restoration using natural processes.
Oh,
Christina, could you mute yourself?
but it takes two, right? Doesn't it, it's going to have to be both teams?
One team did a flyover, that flyover.
Yeah.
maybe the host might be able to do that.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Well, thank you, Julia, for that kind introduction, and thanks for the opportunity to share some thoughts. You're looking at a slide that shows a few things that you'll be hearing about during the presentation. My story starts with the first Earth Day back in 1970 when I was a freshman in college. And it's some of us on this call will remember that it inspired quite a few people to get out into either demonstrating in the street or going to teach-ins and various other ways of taking note that something needed to be done about the environment. And I was in a liberal arts program at the time, and I ended up dropping out because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I did start over in civil engineering as a way to work on environmental stuff. So in a nutshell, we need to reduce carbon dioxide in the air to safe pre-industrial levels. And replicating what happens in the ocean after dust storms and volcanoes seems to be the way to go. This is based on work that I've learned about from Peter Fiakoski, who I believe is on the call. And we've been talking for about a year now, and you'll hear a little bit about some of the work that we're collaborating on. Now, here's a concept that I learned early on in the environmental movement and when I was in engineering school. The Tragedy of Commons talks about if people pay attention most to what's their own and they care less for what is common. And the classic way of explaining this is it's okay if you have a small grassy area in the middle of town and a few sheep come and graze on it. But if you overuse that area, then there's nothing left for anybody. And we can sort of think about it that we've been overgrazing the atmosphere. So that's a thought to keep in mind. The way we know this is some measurements, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir on for many of the people on this call, but for some who may not have seen this, this is a graph of data from an observatory in Hawaii where carbon dioxide is measured on a daily basis, and it swings seasonally, but over the time they've been measuring since 1958, it's gone up. And it used to be around 300 parts per million, and now it's over 420 parts per million, about a 40% increase. We know from ice cores and other geologic and paleontologic record that temperature and carbon dioxide track closely. And what we're looking at here is how that they track closely over hundreds of thousands of years until recently we just go off scale from what rarely exceeded 300 parts per million to now around 420 parts per million. Some of us may have been exposed to the idea of a carbon cycle back in high school or college biology. And lately we, really have been thinking about carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. But if you look at the whole picture, what's going on in the ocean is a big part of it. And I'll be talking more about this.
Oh.
I'm sorry, is that a question? Anyway. Something we have to be mindful of is that this is not just a one-way simple process, but it's an equilibrium that carbon dioxide dissolves, but it also gets re-emitted. Photosynthesis happens, respiration and decomposition, sedimentation. There's a complex process going on, but we're not going to talk about all those details today. I will share something about where carbon dioxide comes from and goes. We are currently emitting about 40 gigatons, that's 40 billion tons, into the air every year, mostly from fossil fuel emissions and other human activities, and some from other land use changes, deforestation and so forth. About 19 gigatons of that gets captured in the air and stays there. About a quarter of that 40 gigatons gets absorbed into the oceans every year. But as I've mentioned, it's in equilibrium and it kind of goes in and out. But the other thing we have to think about is what's going on with forests and other land uptake. But that's only counting for a small amount compared to what we're emitting. And when there's not enough forest around the world, not enough land to plant enough trees to take up all that carbon dioxide. Now, interesting, there's a very tiny number over here, and that has to do with the engineered carbon removal solutions like direct air capture and so forth. And so far, those are experimental, and we haven't really been achieving very much there. Those would need to scale up thousands of times. Now, one way to keep in mind what's going on is to relate the concentration in parts per million.
Sorry, David, Julia or
Yeah.
can you mute? Everybody's on mute.
To mute, please, so that
Yeah, if we could ask everyone who's listening in to please mute in case there's some background noise. Appreciate that. Anyway, I was starting to say that we can relate the concentration in parts per million to the number of gigatons in the air. I won't bore you with the formula, but you can see that the difference between where we were and where we are is close to 1,000 gigatons. You can round it up to talk about 1,000 gigatons. And we know what happens in the ocean is that as carbon dioxide goes up, pH in the ocean goes down. And here's some data from Hawaii where the concentration in the ocean of carbon dioxide is going up and the pH is going down. We also know from the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration and NASA that the amount of heat energy that's stored in the ocean has been increasing. And this is going to have a deleterious effect on coral. I was just reading some more about that today, that the predictions are fairly dire, and these are essential to the life in the ocean and in the food chain. We also know that this is 15-year-old data, but phytoplankton have, I believe, been declining in the ocean, and that's affected by the pH and temperature conditions. So here's where we are. The ability of the oceans to absorb carbon dioxide is being overwhelmed. That's how you get the acidification. We've got excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and we're continuing to contribute to that. And the estimate is we need about 60 gigatons a year removal from 2030 to 2050 to get rid of that excess carbon dioxide. Well, I'm reminded of a Gary Larson cartoon from a few years ago. The picture's pretty bleak, the world's climates are changing, and we all have a brain about the size of a walnut. Well, this is from 1985, and it's sort of like, in a lot of ways, we've sort of been acting like this. So we really need to get together with everyone and change the thinking. And one way to do this is to understand how nature does it. There's an oceanographer by the name of J.H. Martin, who back in the 1990s observed that dust storms lead to increased phytoplankton growth in the ocean, and that's due to photosynthesis. And the depositing of iron is the key nutrient that helps those phytoplankton to have enough to be able to grow. And that comes not only from dust, but from volcanic activity, ocean upwelling, and whale feces. So the volcanic activity that we know about, it's very interesting to read about what happened after the 1991 volcano in the Philippines called Mount Pinatubo. And early in the day in June 1991, it sort of looked like this, which is kind of picturesque. But later in the day, it was pretty terrifying. And a space satellite photograph with the outline of the Philippines shown in red shows that ash plume going out into the South China Sea. And I call your attention to the scale bar of 100 kilometers there, because later on I'll be talking about an experiment in an area that would be 100 kilometers by 100 kilometers. So you can see how that would fit in that area in the South China Sea. Well, after that volcano occurred, there was a slight pause in that curve that I showed you earlier. And if you do a close-up, it's calculated that there's somewhere around 17 to 20 gigatons of difference in that short period of a year, year and a half. And then the gradual climb in concentration resumes along that trend line. So it's not only the Pinatubo volcano that I'll be talking about, but there's also a couple of others. And the important thing to realize is that there was a downwelling eddy in the South China Sea that recurs due to the changing currents. And what a downwelling eddy will do is pull the phytoplankton down after they expire and other organic matter where the carbon has gotten trapped in the food cycle. And that's what we're hoping to replicate. This is a picture depicting downwelling eddies. And if you can see those current lines moving, a clockwise turn indicates a downwelling eddy. The highlighted area in the middle, the little green circle, is the approximate location of the volcano. And so you can see offshore evidence of a downwelling eddy. This is data from January 2025, and as I say, it comes and goes. Other historical volcanoes that we've been able to identify include one back in 1815 and another one as far back as 1580 that occurred near areas of downwelling eddy. And yes, there was in the CO2 record, the ice cores and so forth that we can see, it shows that indeed there was some reduction. So we're very encouraged that this can be replicated. So let's learn. Phytoplankton are plants, basis of the food chain. They use CO2. They need iron. Iron sinks, and so the phytoplankton are largely iron deficient. But when you add iron from dust storms and volcanoes, you get phytoplankton blooms. So we believe that the Mount Pinatubo pause, as we call it, is most likely explained by this, and we'd like to see if we can replicate that. You'd call it phytoplankton-based carbon dioxide removal. And I'm fond of this idea that correlation doesn't always mean causation, because of course everybody went to the moon has eaten chicken, so maybe chicken makes you go to the moon. Not so much. But if you look at the data in other observations, for example, in the early 1900s, cigarette consumption in men increased steeply, and about 20 years later, you get a curve of lung cancer incidence practically mirroring that cigarette consumption. And we're pretty sure there's a connection there. So here's a picture depicting what our approach would involve in a pilot project. Distributing iron dust repeatedly from a ship, very small quantities, allowing the phytoplankton to grow and take in CO2, doing it for a long enough period that the nitrogen fixing organisms grow, helping to sustain the phytoplankton. It's a little marine biology that's a little beyond me, but has been explained as an important factor. And of course, the downwelling eddies that pull that carbon deep into the ocean. We monitor this with some small ocean buoys that have carbon dioxide sensors. We also measure with the orbiting carbon observatory satellite, which I'll talk more about, and that measures carbon dioxide at the surface. And we can use unattended, uncrewed autonomous vessels with sensors on them to monitor things like how much fish growth there is, because when you stimulate phytoplankton growth, you also stimulate growth of the rest of the food chain. So here's a picture of one of those buoys. It's about 16 inches in diameter. It's actually pretty small. And the satellite, which is currently in a polar orbit, goes around the Earth and takes pictures or senses, not pictures, but sensing from 10-kilometer wide paths. And that data we've learned how to analyze. One concern is that in the fiscal year budget that's proposed and is being discussed in Congress right now, the acting administrator of NASA has proposed to remove funding for it. And it's $15 million a year that's needed. If that's not continued, they have to deorbit the satellite. They can't just leave it up there unattended. It has been in operation for 11 years successfully. It has enough fuel to go on probably for another 15 years. And we'd really like to have that data available. But if they turn it off, they have to deorbit it, bring it down into the ocean. And it cost $750 million to launch originally. It would be a great loss. This is an example of the kind of data that we get showing whether there's increasing or decreasing carbon dioxide at the surface. So the project I've described is low risk. It's doing what happens naturally. The 100-kilometer by 100-kilometer area that we'll need to do a pilot study is a tiny fraction of the ocean area. And we'd use a very small amount of iron dust, we believe, in order to get an effect. It's really about an ounce or so per acre. It's astonishingly small. We do need to gather ecological baseline data to be able to ensure that.
They're down at the end.
I'm sorry, was there a question? We need to gather that baseline data, and we're talking to some marine biologists about collecting some literature studies, and of course, doing monitoring during the project. Some of the measurements we'll plan on doing are going to help us to monitor the success of the project. And there's some additional parameters that will help us to answer questions about what's going on and whether it's really safe for the environment. So data quality is key. We need to do it right. It's going to cost a lot of money to do that. But the question is, it's important to think about what we're going to measure, measuring it correctly, and then understanding what those numbers tell us. Now, you may have heard of a concept called monitoring, reporting, and verification, and it's usually talked about in the context of carbon credits. And that's not something we're doing with our project. So our project is intended to prove that carbon dioxide is removed, and we call that effectiveness, and to monitor ecological parameters to ensure safety and understand the benefits to fisheries and ocean pH. And of course, doing this in compliance with environmental regulations to make sure there's social acceptance. The monitoring, reporting, and verification methods that have been talked about are targeted at the carbon markets, the carbon credits idea, and it's a whole different process than what we're talking about. And of course, there's ultimately academic research to understand exactly how things are working in the ocean, and that is, again, not part of our purview. We're focused on the first three. And I was told an anecdote by a PhD in the pharmaceutical industry. There's an interesting thing to note that when there's a couple of drugs that we use, specifically metformin for diabetes and lithium for mental health, that are widely used and accepted and believed and understood to have positive effects. But how they have that effect is still being studied. So I think an important thing to learn here is we don't need to wait until everything is fully understood about how ocean iron fertilization works in order to be able to start using it. And a similar metaphor I like to talk about is, if you're worried about flooding your home, you're not going to study the surface tension of water on a sand grain. You're just going to go out and get a lot of sandbags. So I think it's important to maintain focus. So our approach is what I would call walk, run, fly. Uh, Developing our monitoring equipment and trying it out with some limited iron deposition. And this is part of getting that social acceptance. And then working up to larger areas as we learn more about the process and eventually scaling up into multiple regions where we can have a worldwide effect on the excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We're working on an application for an EPA permit under the Marine Protection, Research, and Sanctuaries Act of 1972. And that also implies compliance with the London Protocol, which we won't go into detail here, but it's another way of internationally recognizing protection of the ocean. The requirements for marine carbon dioxide removal are explained on the EPA website, and we have been following an example or two examples of permits that were granted for other types of marine carbon dioxide removal. So we're going to be probably the first for ocean iron fertilization. Some of you are probably familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. Goal number 13 is climate action. But the way they talk about climate action is to focus on adaptation to and mitigation of climate change, not restoration of the climate. And so I think it's important for us to try and communicate the need to do more. And I'm hopeful that in the future, the UN will come around once we're able to demonstrate some more about ocean iron fertilization, that they'll be able to incorporate it into their view. Upcoming in November is what's called the Conference of the Parties, COP30 in Brazil. You may have heard about it in the news. You'll certainly hear more about it in the news in late October, early November. But I'll go back to COP29 and mention that what I heard was that the less developed nations were asking the more developed nations for compensation for environmental damage and economic impact. And they were asking for about $1.3 trillion per year. And they negotiate something in the neighborhood of a $300 billion per year. I don't know whether any money is changing hands, but I know those were the discussions. If you think about the impact of on the economy and the environment is estimated to be $1 trillion, then compare that to the 500 million or $1 billion a year we estimate that might be required for scaled up ocean iron fertilization. That's 1/1000th of that impact cost. And so if the more developed countries have negotiated to put that much money into mitigating and adapting to damage, maybe they can spare a little bit to do something about it. So to wrap it up, we recognize carbon dioxide when there's too much, it represents pollution. We have to worry that right now the government is considering reversing what's called the endangerment finding that was published in 2009, recognizing carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. Uh, we Changing that endangerment finding doesn't change what we know and understand. We've been talking about this for a long time. There are expensive and limited methods that have been proposed, and we think this natural process can scale up in a practical way, and global action is needed. So, Deep Green Solutions is the nonprofit we formed in May. Our 501(c)(3) is pending with the IRS. It takes them several months to process. Our goal is to uh, move this process along. You can help by checking out our website. The QR code here will take you right there. Of course, we do need skilled help like marine biologists and oceanographers and data analysis. But we also could use some charitable contributions to help support the work. You can read more about it there at the website and, of course, get in touch with us. So, leave you with this thought. I don't know if anybody knows who originally said this. You might think that this was some great politician, but it was an American basketball coach, and I think it's spot on. Thank you for listening. That's it.
All right.
Thank
Well,
you, David. That's beautiful. We're now going to open up the floor for Q&A. Camille, thank you for that heart that came up right there. And you can also put questions that you have in the chat if you'd like. So we'll start with Sean, and if for everyone, if you keep your questions concise so that we can take comments, questions from as many people as possible, that'd be really great. Sean.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the presentation, David. I was watching the TEDx by Peter, and I was so the information was very similar, and I appreciate that. But with the main question I have, and maybe you can answer it, I don't know if you can, or Peter can, or anybody can, but why aren't there more climate scientists out there vocally promoting this, at least a test to go forward? I'm very frustrated with that. This is taking a lot of time and a lot of work to actually get the testing done. And I've seen this stuff about climate people wanting to, or the organizations trying to downplay the oil companies, and maybe they would fund this or whatever, but as a negative thing. But I was trying to figure out we can't get more traction, more
I
support.
think I can answer that as a matter of fact, because this week I've been listening to some webinars from the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, uh, headquartered in Washington. And the National Academy is published documents going back at least to 2022 and earlier, in which they acknowledge ocean iron fertilization as a potential opportunity. In fact, there are organizations that are looking at this. Uh, I think one of the interesting things that I'm hearing is that places like Woods Hole Institute and the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute and Dalhousie University and several others are doing research, but the way they're approaching this is from an academic perspective. And they're sort of dipping their toe in the water carefully by doing modeling studies before doing anything else. And one of the things that has happened is that a competing methodology called ocean alkalinity enhancement has become the darling of these organizations and has gotten a lot more traction. It basically involves adding alkaline material to the ocean to uh, counteract the acidification and hopefully cause more carbon dioxide to be absorbed through chemical methods. I'm not sure, I haven't studied it closely, whether that actually has the potential to scale up, but millions of dollars have gone into that. I think we also have to be mindful that over the past 12, 13 years, there have been other ocean iron fertilization experiments, but that the way they were conducted did not capture the favor of the academic community. There were a lot of questions about how the experiments were designed and and the effectiveness, and especially uncertainty about the impacts. Now, as far as we know in our team, there are no adverse impacts that have been observed. But the ocean is a complex place. It's not enough to say we haven't seen anything. People want evidence. And that's what slows things down, is that it takes a lot of money to do marine biology and oceanographic research. So we're in the early stages of getting our permit application submitted to be able to do some of this work. And we're encouraged because when you hear some of the people from Woods Hole and others talking, they're talking more positively like, well, and maybe ocean iron fertilization will also be an opportunity. They're not uh, being as negative as perhaps might have been a couple of years ago. So it's a gradual process. I think there was a good question to ask about why we haven't heard much more about this up till now.
Maybe I'm going to jump ahead in the line. Maybe Peter, did you want to weigh in on that or something else?
Yeah, it's a critical question because it's the reason that F4CR exists. And although there's certainly people are asking about the efficacy of various things, it's well known by the scientists that the ocean alkalinity is almost 1 million times less efficient than OAF. And so nevertheless, it's getting about almost 1 million times more funding than OIF. So you can get a sense that maybe there's a political agenda involved. This is putting 1 million times more money into something that's 1 million times less efficient. And talking to the chief scientist at EDF, the chief scientist at Citizens Climate Lobby, one of the chief scientists at MIT, they all say, we shouldn't restore the climate because we don't know what's going to happen if we bring CO2 back to what it used to be, which is a very weird thing to say. And again, you would think maybe there's a political agenda here. And I've concluded definitely that there's a political agenda. And that is that the UN says very clearly, go to their website, the UN FCCC, the Framework for Climate Change. They're very clear. It says their goal is to stabilize greenhouse gas levels and we have to reduce CO2 30%. That's not stabilization. And so someone who has a high level job at MIT, at Environmental Defense Fund, at Citizens Climate Lobby, where there are thousands and hundreds of thousands of people involved, they have to follow the leader. And so, but many people agree more with David that we have to prove that it works. The nature has proven that it works. and nature has proven that it's safe, but we have to advance the public goal, and that's why F4CR exists, is to have the citizens say, oh, we actually want to restore a safe climate for our children, and hopefully, yeah, and we can inspire funders to do that as well. And after a while, the UN will join us. But it's that political issue that the UN is frozen in 1980, thinking from 45 years ago in 1980.
Peter, I really appreciate you pointing to exactly why F4CR exists, to shift the mindset, the narrative from we're doing what we think we can, the best we can, to no, we're going to restore the climate. And that is exactly what F4CR is about. Thank you for underscoring that.
And I just, again, I want to add, having done this for 15 years, trying to convince people with logic doesn't work, because it's, clearly it's an emotional decision that these scientists, these top scientists, now the lower level scientists are pretty moot about it. They won't say one thing or the other. And then the beginner scientists, the grad students are excited until they talk to their PhD advisors. I've seen this happen many times where I go to a conference and a PhD student or a postdoc gets really excited. Oh my God, this is why I'm in this career. And they come back a week or 2 weeks later and say, I can't work on that. Anyway, I want to draw that picture because it flies against the conventional logic that we're logical beings. We're emotional beings. Okay, long story, but that's why we're here.
Yes, we since you're the founder, we gave you license to be long-winded. Bob?
Thank you. David, thank you very much for that presentation. I welcome the focus on OIF and moving that forward. It's something that I've been engaged in for some while. I do have a question or a concern that I'd like hopefully to be addressed, and that has to do with messaging. F4CR has a messaging focus, but there's a broader climate restoration universe that includes F4CR, the Climate Restoration Alliance, and the Grandparents Fund for Climate Restoration, which, by the way, is the unit of the Climate Restoration Alliance that's attending to the OIF work now and is building it and funding it. But that aside, you can see we have 3 organizations and new people coming in who are unfamiliar with climate restoration generally and unfamiliar with ocean iron fertilization specifically. So the messaging that they're being given now, it can be confusing. Now there's a 4th organization working on climate restoration, working on OIF, confusing to new people particularly, and maybe a lot of others too. The concept is unusual. The confusion is real. So a 4th organization adds to that confusion. And I have a concern about your website, David, that I think can be rectified fairly easily. The Deep Green website, where does it fit in to the existing climate restoration universe? That's not clear at all on your website. Can you clear that up?
That's an interesting question. I've made a note, and I'm sure we'll be discussing that. I guess the little comment that I can make about the multiple organizations is that I've only been involved in this for about a year. I met Peter about almost exactly a year ago, read his book, started having some conversations, and then we worked on our paper together. And I think what we arrived at, and Peter can talk more about the origins of the Grandparents Fund, the Climate Restoration Alliance, Foundation for Climate Restoration, and perhaps other organizations that are out there. He's been on this circuit for a lot longer than I have. But I know when we started talking months ago, it became evident to us that it made sense to try and form an organization that could work on doing pilot studies. And we've got together a team within Deep Green. It's described on the website. We probably need a few other people to add to it, but we're young yet. Uh, I, 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 I think it may at first, I understand it may be confusing that there's multiple organizations, but you could probably draw a picture for yourself on a page that says Grandparents Fund is about fundraising. Client Restoration Alliance was started to promote ocean iron fertilization and other uh, methods of restoring the atmosphere. So it's not just about ocean iron fertilization. Uh, Foundation for Climate Restoration, I understand, is a messaging platform, getting the word out. And Deep Green Solutions is narrowly focused on the phytoplankton-based carbon dioxide removal technology. It just seems to make more sense for us to stay focused as Deep Green Solutions, where we can, have a budget that's narrowly devoted to this specific method. And I've always said, let 1,000 flowers bloom. I'm happy that there are many different ways that people are seeking to figure out ways to restore the climate. Uh, I'm not against any of these other methods. I'm happy for people to research them.
You know,
I
David,
just hope some of the funds would fall our way.
I hate to interrupt, and we're going to need to move on to the last segment of our. There are so many questions, and we'd love to, I don't know, interrogate you for hours. But we need to move on to the rest of our meeting today. And Linda, I'm sorry we can't take your question.
So thank you, Mark. I will introduce what's next. And David, thank you so much. I loved your last comment. May 1,000 flowers bloom. Really, really, everybody. Let's thank David. That was fantastic.
That's a great way to end. Thank you.
Very good. And now I'm really excited to introduce our new board member at the Foundation for Climate Restoration. Some of you met her. She's brand new, but you may have met her last week. And that is Diane Morrison. She joined the board of the foundation. Just a big surprise. I've known Diane for probably 40 years and admired her and respected her for who she is and what she's been committed to with people and causes. But it was so moving when she said, I want to join the board. In fact, I want to take on the area of building funds to fund our efforts. So I'll turn it over to Diane right now to bring it to us.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, David, for your presentation. There's so much to learn and so much to discover. So I love being involved in these presentations. And when I was invited to be on the board, I was just so thrilled and to be responsible for fundraising. It's the work of the Foundation for Climate Restoration is critical to our future. What's the world that our children and grandchildren will live in? For me, that's one of the most important things I've been looking at. What is that world for our grandchildren? What are we leaving them? So to have a climate that will work for the future of all of us, to have our grandchildren be able to thrive with health in a climate, so it's so important for us to keep expanding this conversation and to reach out to people to be able to be engaged in this and taking this on. So, we've taken on expanding social media outreach, to have more and more of us take on climate restoration, to be a powerful voice. We hired a social media company to support us with outreach. And we currently have 54,000 people who have pledged in terms of with social media. And now our commitment is to expand that greatly, to really get that out there more and more and more worldwide. And this is going to take funding. So we're asking each of you to pledge to donate monthly so we can support the growth. And, you know, we have in the chat a donate link that you can go into the chat and link on to that. Our money will be used to expand social media presence and shift the mindset. We will restore the climate for all of us, you know, and then monthly donations really make a difference to support climate restoration ongoingly. But if a monthly donation doesn't work for you and you do a one-on-one, just one time, you know, please do that. But, you know, do what works for you. But I'm really asking, and we are asking for us to take this on, to keep moving and getting more and more people involved in this conversation. The bigger it grows, the more impact we're going to have. So I'll give you a few minutes if you will go into the chat and go to the donate link, and please do what works for you in terms of donation.
That's beautiful, Diane. Frank, did you want to say something about donating?
Yes, but can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
perfect.
we can hear you.
It's confusing. Which of the 4 organizations do you donate to? And
This is for the Foundation for Climate Restoration, Frank, in terms of changing the narrative. If you want to donate to Deep Green, you know, you've heard that, and definitely both and all of them. And thank you, Frank. We know who you are in terms of your commitment to restoring the climate.
Yeah.
Well.
So I guess my question would be, how can we all 4 work together and become more powerful as one unit?
We are one unit working in our 4 different arenas. We are one unit operating in 4 different arenas. It's one. It isn't separate.
Yeah, it's
Julian,
complementary.
I can say a little
I think
bit
the
about
word
that.
complementary
Yeah.
is probably appropriate here because we're doing different things. And as I mentioned, Deep Green is focused on the hard technology work as opposed to the messaging or broader climate restoration view and so forth. So we will appreciate the help and support that is available for that. And everybody has to make a decision about what they think is the most important thing to focus on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we really want to keep getting out there more and more and more and shifting the mindset, you know, getting this so in the world that people are speaking climate restoration, making that difference. Again, the future of our children, the future of our grandchildren. What is that world that we're going to be living in?
Yeah.
So your
Julie, can I-
generosity makes a tremendous difference. So thank you for that. You know, and if you could do the chat and donate, that would be great if that works for you.
Peter, do you want to say something?
Yeah, it's a wonderful problem to have. You know, if you meet someone who wants to contribute to the environment, right? There's probably 40,000 or 100,000 different organizations they could contribute to, and they have the same problem that we have here. We'll resolve it somewhat. You know, Bob's and Frank's questions are really important, and just realize there's not going to be a clean solution. You know, but the priorities are going to change over time. So in the last few days, we have an elders council. We got Mary Robinson added to that. We got Hunter Lovins and Sir David King. So we now have 3 very senior climate experts promoting climate restoration for the first time. We have, I just checked, the TEDx talk has 10,000 views now, 10,000 views in a week. or week and a half, 10 days. The work that F4CR is doing is really important right now. To just get more and more people out. That was one of the reasons we could get Mary Robinson in. She checked, said, oh, this is a real movement now. I'll put my name on it. So wherever your attention goes, put money there.
Yes, and we're not going to be able to hear from you, Diane. We're right at the 2-minute limit, and I want to give the call back to Mark. But if you want to put that in the chat, that'd be great.
The link isn't working for me.
Uh-oh.
Oh, the donation link?
Yep.
Then that's necessary to hear from you.
Okay.
It works for me.
Okay. Try again.
Thank you. All right.
And thank you all for your generosity and the difference that you make in the world. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you very much.
And I'll say thank you for inspiring me. I've got all these balls in the air, and I'm always amazed at how I come to these Wednesday meetings and I'm totally inspired. So thank you, inspiring me.
Well, there's
Yes.
a wonderful symmetry there, Peter, because you inspired the, the genesis of this whole organization, and now we're inspiring you back. It's a wonderful circularity. And thank you for acknowledging that. And thank you, David Snyder, for your commitment, for your, your competence in this, and the rigor that you're bringing to the field, and the energy and the enthusiasm and the clarity to what we're up to. Thank you so much for coming. It's really been a privilege to have you as our guest, David, and we look forward to seeing you a lot, seeing you again. And everybody who's new, we're thrilled to have you. Please keep coming back. Every Wednesday we meet at this time, not always with a guest like this, but sometimes the conversation is amongst ourselves and what we are up to and creating and making happen, shaping this movement week by week, month by month, year by year. So we love having all of you people, and please come back. You'll be getting an invitation to the next meeting. We happen every Wednesday at this time.
Well, let's call on Carol, Peter's co-author. Go ahead. I know you must have something urgent.
It's just I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat. People are very hungry to see your slides in person. David, are you willing to share your presentation?
Yeah, I can probably put together a PDF for it, and I can share that tomorrow.
Oh, PDF. Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. It's been a wonderful event.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.